This is, I think, maybe our 10th Martinis and Lights, and I'm so excited about our speaker tonight. Before I get to the wonderful Jeff Quinlan, I just want to go over a couple of housekeeping items. This presentation is AIA accredited, so after the presentation, as you go out into the hallway, we'll have your CU certificates as well as an AIA sign-in sheet, so you can write your AIA numbers down if you need that sort of credit. So let me get to our speaker. Jeff is definitely one of my favorite speakers. He's here with us all the way from Atlanta. I'm going to tell you a little bit about him before we get started. Jeff has a BS in architectural engineering and an MS in civil engineering, both with emphasis in illumination from the University of Colorado at Boulder. He has worked at Acuity brand since 1994 and is currently Vice President of New Product Development and Technology. He has helped innovate a wide range of products, everything from industrial high base to office lighting. Since 2006, Jeff has been active in leading the development of new and innovative LED products, specializing in engineering Acuity brand's outdoor product portfolio. Pretty impressive. So we all help me and join in welcoming Jeff Quinlan.
Thank you. Okay, can you guys hear me in the back? Yeah. All right. So, front row. Today I really want to spend time today talking about the future of lighting and how we can do lighting better. Does anyone here believe that LEDs are more efficient than most lighting technologies?
Maybe.
Yeah, just maybe. Okay, so for a long time we've talked about how impactful LEDs could be and how much more efficient they were or are than traditional technology. Today, we're not going to talk about that because you all know that. Give me a big nod, yes. We got that. So we're going to talk about how we take that to the next level. But before I jump off, I do like to spend just a few seconds because we really don't know where we're going unless we know where we've been. And so I love this slide. I came across this recently. This is a copy of the 1947 Ies Handbook. I encourage you all, if you've got some free time and have nothing better to do with your life, to download it off the internet and spend time perusing the 1947 catalog. And one of my favorite things from that is this wonderful picture on the right. And it's probably hard to read, particularly in the back. This is the first time I could find that a HID, in this case particularly a mercury vapor lamp, appears in the Ies Handbook. So I've got a pretty good sense of the room. Who here was born after 1947? Notice I didn't ask that the other way around. Okay. So obviously that's a really long time. And that source has done us great service and great justice. Matter of fact, as you look around, just around Manhattan as I was driving in today, who here thinks they saw a high pressure sodium, a metal halide, or a mercury vapor today? Right? They are everywhere. And they're still around, and they will, and I will say this, and if you don't believe me, come talk to me afterwards, they will all be replaced. And everyone knows what they'll be replaced with. Candles. Yes, very energy efficient. So one of the things I wanted to show, this is actually one of my favorite pictures. This is a great example of high pressure sodium, my favorite orange light, right? I actually had a chance to speak to some customers probably about a year ago. It's from one of the major metropolitan cities in the middle of the Midwest. And they said, we really like LED lighting. They're engineers. They've done the calculations, and slam dunk, no two ways about it, LED was by far the right solution. They said, but Jeff, I got a problem. I said, well, what's the problem? They said, well, when we do the calculations, and we've seen the layouts, we've looked at the levels, under high pressure sodium, we've had about 5-foot candles around the city. And with LEDs, we've come to realize, we've looked at a lot of applications, we've looked at a lot of case studies, and at about 3-foot candles, the LEDs provide a very similar illumination or perception of brightness. And so I said, the problem is, in our city, the chief of police gets veto power over any changes to the lighting. Does anyone in this room find that unfortunate and odd other than me? Right? So the chief of police, and I said, so how do we convince the chief of police? I said, well, it's very simple. I said, convince them to let you do one street, just one street in downtown, one block, and switch those out to LED. And bring the chief of police out there and have a high pressure sodium to your left and the LED to your right, and ask them, what are the colors of the cars there versus there? And I said, and your conversation will be over, right? Because while it's true that each of you as lighting professionals in this room recognize the inevitability, and I love that word, inevitability, of the change to LED lighting, how many people have a lot of resistance from people who are in the lay area of our business? And we got Pam, who's been honest and raised her hand. I guess the rest of you got all slam dunked, right? So before I leave this, I did want to hit one more thing, which was the kind of obvious for any doubters in the room. This job is almost 2 years old, so this is 2-year-old data. So 2 years ago, we took a parking lot, the one that's up in the top, that was 250 watt metal halide, and for the electrical engineers in the room, that really isn't 250 watts, it's 295, right? Yes, yeah. And we switched that out for actually a real measured 145 watts worth of LED at the bottom. Now, what's interesting, and I'll say this today, and I'll probably say it a couple times before we're over, pictures, you have to be very careful with pictures, because as we all know, pictures can be deceiving. That being said, the reason why I love this photo is because they actually managed to get the spill light from the building behind. And when you compare the two spill lights, the luminance is fundamentally matched, which tells you the exposure is very similar, right? So what's the net effect? The luminance level goes up slightly, the uniformity goes up significantly, and the wattage goes down. On most applications, with a simple LED switch out, you're going to save roughly 50% of the energy. I got a couple quotes in here today, and one of my favorites is this one. Darkness is to space what silence is to sound, i.e. the interval. Before I started presenting tonight, I was talking a little bit about lighting and about some of the challenges we've faced in lighting. And what that is that historically our sources were huge. Because the source was huge, and I've spent the majority of my career trying to capture every lumen that comes out of a very large, high wattage HID lamp and try to redirect it onto an application. And no matter how good we ever got, and we spent decades, 1947, working on getting better at it, no matter how good we got, we still weren't near perfect. And I use that carefully. And so what does that mean? What that means is the application level, what ends up happening is a lot of spill light. Who here thinks spill light is bad? Who here realizes that spill light is good? Right? That's weird, isn't it? Right? There's a part of you, and many of you raised both hands, right? Just like me. Right? There's a part of you that realizes that when we talk about spill light, that spill light can go to places we want it to go. And so what was interesting is that when the first LED roadway lights came out, right, there was this aggressive charge to help show the world that LEDs, while they weren't very efficient yet, could do a better job. And the way they did a better job is they increased, and as a CU graduate, I'll say this, the coefficient of utilization. I have a shout out for the CUs in the room, yeah, CUs. It changed the coefficient of utilization so much because it improved the amount of flux on task. And by doing that, we're able to have a less efficient source that did a better job of putting flux on task, which meant the illuminance on the roadway went up. But there was a problem, and without the cheaters who had the conversation with me at the start, does anyone know what the problem was? Spill light. And not the bad spill light, the good spill light. And by that, what I mean is, all of a sudden, we had people who would call up and say, hey, I just did this layout, we did a test sample install, and I'll say this is from some other people's products, not per se the ones that I work with, but they called up and said, hey, the roadway is beautiful. There's no light on the sidewalk. And it's kind of a moment, right? So what we did as an industry, and I'll say that as an industry, we did an excellent job of putting that light onto the task, which was the roadway, and we missed the secondary or tertiary task, right? And so I kind of joke about this, and I do like this picture because it covers several things. So the roadway's a task, the sidewalk's a task, the curb is a task, right? Vegetation is a task, and uniformity is important. Anyone else want to guess what one other task is? I live in Georgia, we call them deer. right? It is really interesting. When you put all the light on the road, there's no deer, and then there's a deer in the road, and then there's a deer in my car, right? If I put just a little bit of light off the side, it gives me better visibility. And you can take that still light concept one step farther, right? Here's a great example. Who here has ever heard of the MLO? Model Lighting Ordinance? Ies? Dark skies? Anyone? 3 people? Yeah, I got everybody. Okay. So one of the things I talk about the MLO is about controlling the bug rating of a product. And I'll sit here and say, there is nothing more important than not putting light into the sky, except, and there's where it's important to understand, and it's important to understand the difference between the different design methodologies, except for when it should, right? And here's a great example. So here's a streetscape that has been converted to LED. You can see the high pressure sodium unless you're in the far back, at the far distance down the road. And what you see here, and this is really important, is that yes, the road is uniformly illuminated, and it's beautiful. I'm an outdoor lighting guy, of course it's beautiful, right? But then on top of that, the vegetation, the trees are green. And yes, it's summer. You can tell it's summer. Anyone want to tell me why you know it's summer? Because there's patriotic banners in the middle of the street, right? Red, white, and blue. So we know it's the summertime. But if it's high pressure sodium, what do those trees look like? It's leaf peeping time, right? It's brown and orange. But here we are, it's summer, and I want to say this very carefully, there's the appropriate amount of uplight to wash the buildings. Now, who here wants to live on the second story of one of those buildings? Right? But that's not the point here, right? If you're an owner of a restaurant, what don't you want? You don't want darkness, right? I want my space to feel warm and inviting. And does warm mean that it should be high pressure sodium? Yeah, maybe not, right? So I'm going to take this one more application step further, and here's another example. This is another LED retrofit. We come in, and what I love about this picture is it does a good job of driving the importance of vegetation, right? Ironically, I will say, as an outdoor lighting guy, my arch nemesis is things that grow, because for some reason, I cannot explain, I think every landscape person in the world says, there's a lighting pole, let's plant a bunch of bushes around it that will grow really tall soon. I've got some phenomenal photos of fixtures that are actually feet into a bush. As it turns out, they're not very efficient when they're in the bush. But that being said, it is important as a visual experience what that downtown, and this course would be like a municipal building, what that downtown experience is and how we can enhance that experience through quality of lighting. And then boom, you can see the rest of that high pressure sodium, that orange glow that's like the island, right? A beautiful island of LEDs. So one of the things that we talk about is tailored lighting. And I want to pause here. Tailored lighting is about knowing what the applications are and about placing the lighting where you want it to go. So, do you need 100-foot candles everywhere? Does every office require 100-foot candles on every inch of the floor? Who here has ever worked in a building where it's 100-foot candles everywhere? Nobody, it's just me. I got one guy in the back. Right? Do we remember the days when the 2-foot by 4-foot troffers all touched everywhere? Right? And they all had 4 lamps, right? And there was a little bit of a hum. Right? We've come a long way in that technology, and we've come a long way in knowing what the modern office looks like. As a matter of fact, one of the things I like to point out to people is today, the principal office task is a self-luminous device. Right? So it makes you have to think about what you want the lighting to be. And that applies to outdoor lighting as well. One of my favorite lighting applications, the gas station canopy. Right? Tip, if you don't know, if you ever have a dental emergency and it's night, go to a gas station. It's the only place outdoor where there's as much light on the task as there is in your mouth at the dentist's office. Right? So, super bright. Now, why are they bright? Well, it's pretty simple. One, brightness catches attention, right? So, okay, bright light catches my attention. And I want to make sure that they pick my gas station, not the 3 on the other corners. So what do? I'll make it as bright as I possibly can. As a matter of fact, disability glare, I don't care because you see my gas station last, right? And so that really is an example where tailored lighting could be better. How many foot candles do you think is required to drive between the gas pumps? 1? Right? How many does it take to see that self-luminous digital display that tells me how much gas is coming out? 5? Right? Now, and I would challenge you then to think about what we're trying to do and if there's a creative way to solve that problem. As a matter of fact, at a national level, how can we tell if we're getting the light where we want it to be? Well, there's a couple spots in Montana where it seems to be working. And all around Salt Lake, which is a big black island with a white dot in the middle of it, right? I love this picture because no matter who you are, you can pick out, I know exactly where Atlanta is, right? Big glowing dot in the southeast, right? And so when we look at this, what we see is an opportunity, and opportunities to do a better job. So when people think of color, when I talk to my friends and family, and I say, what's the first thing that comes to mind when I say color? They say red, green, blue, right? When lighting people think of color, we think about shades of white. We think about correlated color temperature. Who here has tried to walk someone through what 2500 Kelvin means? Who here's had their mother call them after putting 5000 Kelvin LED lights on her Christmas tree and hating them? She's like, why didn't you warn me? Why didn't you tell me you were buying Christmas tree lights? Oh, right? It's a very interesting problem, and it's a really odd problem that we still are grasping with, which is, when do we have the right color? And what is that color? It's a very interesting effect that certain people have a certain affinity to other kinds of lights. I sat down with a small municipality once, and they had high pressure sodium, and I was trying to convince them why no halide would be a good solution. And they looked at me and they said, one of the guys said to me, my wife likes candlelight. She likes high pressure sodium. That's why we're not changing. He was the mayor, and the conversation was over, right? But what's interesting is today with LEDs, and I want to be really careful here, not only can we provide practically any near white LED version at any major color temperature, but we can do it at the same time with better color. I pause there, because color means so many different things. This is one of my favorite pictures. This was taken out at a port job, and they had just retrofitted part of the port to LEDs. And the rest of the port was high pressure sodium. Right? And if I didn't have the captions under it, everybody in this room would know which one was which. Right? And I want to be very careful because I hear terms like full spectrum. Right? And while that is a term, and it does a good job of describing the general trend of LED lighting, i.e. LEDs are more full spectrum, than say high pressure sodium, they are not in essence truly full spectrum. So I want to kind of take a quick look. This is the moment where we get really geeky. A couple people in the room will be really excited. The rest of you will be bored. Hang with me for like 2 slides and we'll be out of it, okay? Spectral power distribution function. Woo! Any engineers in the room? Never woohoo? Woo! Okay. So there's our spectral power distribution function. And what you see here is a 5000 Kelvin LED in the blue curve and high pressure sodium in the orange curve. No kidding, I picked those colors intentionally. Right? And when you look at those curves, what you see, and I've conveniently put, for those people that don't think 500 nanometers is a certain color off the top of their head, I've put a nice rainbow color going from ultraviolet to infrared on the bottom. Right? And what we see here is on a 5000 Kelvin, we've got a lot of good blues, and we've got some good greens, and everything from green to red. So what does that mean? That means that the majority of the colors are rendered very effectively under a 5000 Kelvin LED source. Now, there's a couple people who asked the question, so I'll preemptively answer it. So does that mean that if you had a green car, it wouldn't appear green under an LED light? Because there's a small dip near the green. And what's interesting for the color geeks in the room, I'm sure there's got to be at least 4, right? For the color geeks in the room, as it turns out, when you see a color like green, it's not really just green. And what I mean by that is it's not monochromatically green. It's actually a whole bunch of colors. It's like getting the old comic books or comic strips when we were kids, not now because now it's actually all digitally done and all beautifully rendered. But in the old days, you looked at it really close and there were a bunch of dots. And those dots all together, you went to the Chicago Art Institute, right? Pixelation. All those dots put together form a perception of a color. And so when a color is green, it's not monochromatically green, it's like 800 different colors that blend to green. Right? And so that's why this effect still works. One more geeky moment, which is I just wanted to kind of share with you kind of some of those different shades of color and what the difference is. And I will say these have all been normalized. Right? So run that through the back of your head, it's been normalized. 3 curves, a 3, 4, and 5,000 Kelvin LED on those 3 curves. And you can see, and I'll say this very carefully, the subtle but important differences between 3, 4, and 5,000 Kelvin. Right? Now what's interesting is the chip is the same. Therefore the blue hump is similar, but it scales. And that's because more of the radiation from the blue LED is being converted by a different set of phosphors. Those phosphors are moving the larger curve around, and that's what's creating the different colors. Once again, there's that word color, not red, green, blue color, but white color. So why do we care, right? In nature, light creates a color. In the picture, color creates the light. So we think in color, right? We think about color. It affects everything we think. So when we see a picture like this, you see an entry to a hospital, and there's a lot going on there. I'll say this, architecturally it's busy, right? This is actually the daytime entrance to the hospital wing, not the emergency, right? It doesn't have a big red emergency on it. So you pull up to this, and what's interesting about the space, and what I love about this picture in particular, is not only the unique architecture, but the use of lighting to create a different layered visual experience. And that color, as you go from the outside, which actually the parking lot's around 5,000 Kelvin, the walls are lit around 3,500 Kelvin, and the interior space is around 3,000 Kelvin. So what does that do to a human? Right? Why is it that stop signs are painted red? Right? Because we have a natural tendency to be attracted to the 2 people in the room that are wearing red. Right? Lucky you today, right? So you wear red and people see red much more frequently. It's just a natural response. And we have a natural response to go towards warmer colors. So when you see a picture like this, your eye tends to move to the high brightness and warmer color. And that's how we can create this sort of visual experience. And the reason why I took the time on the geek slides a minute ago was to talk about this. So does anyone have a TV at their house? Does anyone know how to know if the battery's dead or if the LED emitter on the remote is dead? I got a yes in the front row. This is actually kind of a cool trick. If you ever want to know, you can actually take the remote, take your camera, your smart camera, shine the remote into the camera, hit the button. And here's what's crazy. You can't see it because it's infrared, but the CCD camera on the phone can see it. And it converts that to white. So if someone's aiming a light at you that's infrared and they're flashing it, it shows up on that camera, right? And that's weird, right? And so we pause for a second with that weird moment. And we'll take one step back and say, so when you think of security cameras, and that's why I love this picture, when you think of security cameras, the spectral response of the security camera is not the same as the visual response curve of the human eye. Ooh, there's a heady moment, right? And so depending on the type of camera, and I'll use this was actually a job that was done up in Canada at a healthcare facility. One of the parking lots had been changed out to LED, one of them had not. I'll let you all pause for a minute and guess which one's which, right? And that night, after it had been installed, the security team was looking at the security feeds and was stunned. And they took a screen capture of the desktop and sent it to us. Tell me that's not profound. And why is that? Because, and I'll say this again carefully, the quote, full spectrum nature of LED light sources produce more wavelengths in a wider range, which the camera is more susceptible to, and therefore created a brighter, more vibrant response on the camera. And the majority of people who have security cameras have largely already come to recognize this. The other thing when we talk about lighting, in a very simple term, is wayfinding. So I showed this picture before. This is the wonderful high pressure sodium. And I want you to focus on the sidewalk, right? We'll call that a trip hazard, right? So how do we manage a trip hazard? We paint it yellow, right? A little curve, a little yellow. And you can tell that one's been painted, right? How about now? Right? So think of the hospital facility, think of the medical facility, think of the 24-hour medical response facility. Think of those places which do a good job of providing that visual cue. Why? Because people who are visually impaired and old, well, older people use hospitals more than younger people, except for very young people, right? And so what's my clientele? Older people, I'm one of them, right? And what do older people tend to have in common about their visual systems? They're decaying. Well, that's why we all wear bifocals when we get old enough, right? And eventually have some form of maybe cataracts. And so what's really important? I don't want them to trip on that curb, right? And by providing a full spectrum response, we can manage that effect. So, just to recap the basics, significant energy savings, long life, superior lighting quality across virtually every metric you can imagine. But I want to kind of go the next step. Matter of fact, I like to call this plus sizing the opportunity. Technology improvements. In the 19th century, there were two amazing inventions, one of which I absolutely hate, and I'll let you guess which one it is. No, it's not the incandescent lamp, right? So those two things were invented within about a decade of each other. And who here has got a phone in their house? Right? They're still around, right? We still use them. Thank God we don't have to call an operator, because I wouldn't know how to say Dakota 123 or something. But there's the phone and there's the lamp. And over time, those technologies advanced. As a matter of fact, I love this. My dad had a bag phone when I was a kid, right? He had a bag phone. I don't think in the 8 years he had a bag phone, he ever used the bag phone. Matter of fact, one time I said, "Can we call Mom?" He said, "Are you kidding? That's $10 a minute to use that. You're not calling Mom." I'm like, why do you have a bag phone if you don't? It's in case someone important has to get a hold of me. I understand. So the bag phone freed us from the worst thing in the world, a cord, right? And I say it freed us and it chained us. It chained us to being able to respond to anyone 24 hours a day. Can I have a woohoo? Yeah. What a great invention. Thank you, Alexander Graham Bell. And technology progresses. So the 8-pound bag phone eventually became an incredibly small, very easy to lose, itty-bitty cell phone that my fingers wouldn't be able to dial because it's so small, right? And our technology progressed all the way from the traditional shaping of a beam with a simple refractor to complex LED solutions. And the question is, what's next? And that's what we're going to finish talking about today, which is the smartphone. Who here doesn't have a smartphone, right? So thank you. Brave and honest, right? The vast majority of people, I like brave and honest, by the way. The vast majority of people have a smartphone, right? And what's interesting is how that phone has changed our world. When I was a kid, I could have called on my dad's bag phone and called my mom. "Mom, the Dukes of Hazzard are on at 7 o'clock on channel 4. Can you record it?" If my dad let me use the phone, right? Today, I can pull up my phone and Dukes of Hazzard's on TV land, and I can program my DVR to record it right now. And I'm not saying that's the best use of a smartphone, but it's interesting how that technology's changed our world. So, how can we take that the next step in lighting? So I'm going to show you a series of applications and talk a little bit about them. One of them is this one, and I got to say, I love this. Here's a parking lot, and here's a parking lot and a parking garage. Now, Boy, I guess I'm not doing very well. So here's a parking garage and a parking lot. And what's interesting is we know this is not New York, right? Because at 2 a.m., someone's in a parking garage in New York. But once you get away from New York, pretty much everywhere you go, there's a parking lot somewhere that doesn't have anybody in it, right? So if you talked about the effectivity of that light, what would you say? It's 100% on and nobody's there. Okay? And what's interesting, I'm going to pause again for one quick second. The lighting levels that we specify, the lighting levels which we produce in order to do good lighting in a parking lot, are designed to account for two things, right? I don't want to hit someone with my car, and I don't want to be hit by someone's car, right? So I want them to see me, and I want to be able to see people. When no one's in the parking lot, how much light do you need? Well, you say 0, and I'll say this, in a world with security, does anyone here work in a corporate building where you wouldn't want to have any lights on around the building? No, probably not. But here's the real question. If nobody's there, how much light, hint, hint, nudge, nudge, how much light does it take for the security camera to see people? And the answer is not very much, right? Very little. So I want to kind of give an example of how this works in practice. So here's actually that parking lot from earlier in the presentation. So before, 250 watts, 250 watt metal halide, 295 watts of power. After the install, it dropped down to 144 watts. The lighting level was good. With the simple addition of a motion detector, right? You put a motion detector on there, and now the 144 watts can drop to 64 watts, and the energy savings can go to 78%. Does anyone here want to guess how much time those lights are completely dimmed? Anyone here doubt that in the majority of lighting applications, in the majority of parking lots, that's the majority of the time? Yeah. Matter of fact, I think at University of California, Santa Barbara, they did a study in their parking garage, and they determined they were able to cut the energy load by an additional 85% because of the infrequency of people using the garage, right? So if no one's there, we don't need as much light. Matter of fact, if you now compare that to the original, so here's the exposed photos, and unfortunately there's a little light up here, but you generally get the feeling that the light levels are nearly similar. Matter of fact, they're so close that if you're in the job and you're standing there and you're standing out of the motion sensor and you don't move, or not very much, and the lights go to dim, you can't even tell. It's that subtle. So, where does that take us? So now we can put motion sensing, right, which allows us to further harvest the energy savings in a job. But we can take motion with intelligence to the next level. As a matter of fact, this is another one of my favorite pictures. This is a parking garage, but I want to talk about this parking garage. So it's not uncommon in a lot of applications today to see a motion sensor connected to a luminaire, right? And what does it look like if you step into the garage? The light goes on, right? But does that feel good? Not compared to that, right? So what we've done there is now we put an intelligent sensor on a Wi-Fi system, connected it to a bunch of luminaires that have been grouped based on, boy, it's progressed, sorry about that, based on grouping luminaires on an application basis, and we've allowed the sensor to automatically trigger the change. So what does that mean? That means the lights come on in groups, and if you group them intelligently, and there we go again, it's giving me a hard time here, pardon me. So it changed, and that's from you. So it changes in groups, and by changing in groups, we're able to control that visual experience and intelligent group them. And now let's go flick. There we go. Okay, so what does that look like? And this is the really important part. When you're thinking about outdoor lighting, what you don't want is the mother that just happens to be putting stuff in the car and happens to be partially occluded by the column to have the lights, because it can't see her, all of a sudden turn off or dim down really low. So the way the intelligent system should work, here's an example of a curve. The moment it stops sensing, it starts gradually dimming over a 5-minute period. Because really, at the end of the day, it spends so much time in dim mode, it doesn't matter if it takes 5 minutes, but it assures that a person gets picked up and has enough light for enough time to do the task they need, which is typically loading the car. Now, what's interesting is, what happens if you took 5 minutes to get back up to brightness? Well, that would be kind of disconcerting. So we do the reverse when it comes to motion detected, and you don't want it to turn on instantly, right? Before, when we were setting up, Jessica was working on the lights, and she was turning lights on and off, and we were sitting here talking, and it was pop off, pop off. And it's not per se the lights were that bright, but when you go from dark to bright, to dark to bright, to dark to bright, you kind of go, wow, it's a little bit crazy, right? And so you manage that by gradually controlling the rate at which it comes on as well. So what does this do? Well, this lays the foundation for all the things we're starting to see in the world. Does anyone know what Nest is? Intelligent HVAC control that's Wi-Fi capable, so that if you're in Bermuda and you live in upstate New York and you realize your house is still set at 85, you can turn it down remotely, right? The Internet of Things, right? We're coming into a time when your refrigerator will be on the Wi-Fi, so that when you go to the store, I don't know, maybe you'll be able to see the inside of your fridge by a camera. And then you realize not only do you have to get milk, but you have to clean your refrigerator, right? But the refrigerator will be on, the TV is on, all of these components are on, and in the future, the majority of lighting products will be on the internet. And so what does that allow us to do? Well, we're moving into a digital world. And so, for example, this is a great application shot. Here's an example of a whole bunch of lighting fixtures in an office complex. And what we can now start to do is we can now determine things like power, dimming. Is there a day burner? Did anyone see day burners out in New York today? I think I passed 52 on the way here, right? I'm sure they weren't supposed to be on. You can determine performance. And I'll say this carefully, because some of the stuff's been around for a couple of years. You can actually start two-way communication. So I'll let you think about what you can do with that. So when it comes to outdoor LED controls, and this is a really big deal. I love this as a modeled application space. So we've got this modeled application space, and let's just pretend this is a 24-hour, and someone help me out here. Where I'm from, we got Kroger's, Safeways, anyone want to throw out a store? Stop and Shop, Walmart. Walmart's tough, because Walmart actually, I've been at Walmart at 2 o'clock in the morning in Georgia, and it's packed. So Walmart's a bad example. But if you think about the more local grocery store that's actually open 24 hours, when you pull into the parking lot, are all the lights on? Yes. Do they need to be? Right? Now here's what's interesting. I'll work a little thought experiment with all of you in the room. What is it you want to communicate if you're the store owner? Security, safety, open, and don't forget the gas station problem. Hey, I'm over here, right? So you got all that going on at the same time. Now here's what's funny. If I took the back half away from the store, if I took that part of the parking lot, who parks in that part of the parking lot at 2 a.m.? Except for the Walmart, right? Nobody parks there. So I've got this huge amount of space that no one parks in. If I dimmed that to half, and I'll say that carefully, half, still meeting IS requirements, don't ever break the rules of meeting IS requirements, but I'm still meeting IS requirements, but I'm dimmed to half. What does that do to the foreground? Brighter. Ooh, that'll mess with your head for a while, right? When you go home tonight, you'll be laying in bed, thinking about what a great presentation this was. You'll be thinking, wow, I can make things brighter by making things darker, right? It's kind of a weird one. Yeah, no, a couple people are like, oh, yeah. But it's really interesting because talk about an opportunity. How many lights are on full bright all the time that can be dimmed? And what's amazing is you could sell that alone on the energy savings, let alone the increased perception of brightness. So what you can do is you can dim out certain sections. Some multi-use facilities might have a store that's open 24 hours, but the rest of the stores aren't. You typically don't have people park there. Once again, we don't want to go to off. We want to go to dim. And you want to go dim enough that you meet the IS requirements and bright enough that the security cameras can pick up motion, right? And then you can also set multiple levels. One of the things I like to talk about is in large Here we are, just outside of Madison Square Garden. Of course, there's not a plethora of parking here, but I'm sure all of you have been to a sports facility that has lots of parking, right? And what's interesting is, depending on who's at the venue, say Garth Brooks, who's coming to Atlanta soon, versus a small hockey game, right, a local regional hockey game, the type of lighting you want to put in that parking changes. You ever want all lights off? No. But if you're going to close off part of the parking lot, you could dim them down. So I don't want to leave this without saying something, because I'm not sure if everyone here has heard of this, and this is one of those weird moments. There's a new ANSI specification that came out about a year ago. This is C136.41.2013, and if you can't remember that, I'm sorry. But what this is, and this is going to be a big deal. There's those points when technology change comes that changes the way we do lighting. What this does is this says a standard NEMA receptacle is now designed to have a 5 and a 7 communication protocol. So there's 5 or 7 pins, and I don't want to say pins because there's actually only 3 pins because it fits a normal NEMA receptacle. So if you take one of these smart things and you put it on a dumb luminaire, it will still act as a photocell. If you take one of these things and you put it on a smart luminaire, now not only do you have the control of feeding information back about what the luminaire is doing, which is what the smart photocell did before, but now you can tell the smart photocell what you want it to do. So if you're a large facility use and you realize, holy cow, Garth Brooks has come down with laryngitis, he's not going to make the show. I programmed the building a month ago, I forgot to reset the program. I can go in and say, take all the parking lots, keep them dimmed to 50%, and that goes over the internet, and boom, the lights dim. Right? And that will change the way we can control lights. So what does that look like? A smart control, talking to a gateway, talking to a network operations center, which comes into a customer portal, and by doing that, you're actually able, over the internet, right? Internet of Things, can you have a woohoo? Internet of Things. There we go, okay. Using that, we have the Internet of Things, we'll have control. But I don't want to leave just there. There's one more thing I want to talk about, and that's dynamic lighting. Who here has ever seen a really bad color lighting job? Yeah, we all seen probably at least one. I've seen a couple that have gone catastrophic. The reason why I use this photo is because it's actually one of the better ones I've ever seen. Now, outside of New York, which I think, I know when they do the Empire State Building, I think it's well done. Maybe you all don't share that opinion. But this is an example of what I call good saturation, good color mixing. What I find is interesting is, when they designed it, that's not what they were thinking. Right? And I will say, obviously that was just a temporary display to kind of show that experience. And when I say dynamic color, everyone says, oh, RGB? No. I mean, that's what it's been a lot of. But now when we talk about dynamic lighting, you can think of it temporally. So what do I mean by that? All the stuff I just talked about. Motion sensing, changing the light level. Communication protocols, changing the light level. And those light levels could change both in intensity as well as color, ultimately. And I believe that's the next big wave coming. But I want to stop and I want to say, there's another one that we haven't seen, and I want to show you an example of that. And that is a change in distribution. Right? As I describe these applications, and I've talked about the parking lot is designed to light the parking lot. It's a large area task. What's interesting is when you get to certain application spaces like this wall pack that's outside of a school, the task changes based on people. Right? And I would say, how many people have ever seen a wall pack on the back of a warehouse? How about 10 million of them? Right? And what is the purpose of that wall pack? I got some people who are actually vocal. Give me a couple. Security. There's one.
Skies.
Like the skies. There's another one, yeah. Okay, so here's what's interesting. Security, if someone's coming in the building, we want to be able to see them, right? So motion, right? Motion could be important. Another piece of it is sometimes actually lighting the building, right? And what I mean by that is if I've got signage or other things that are out there, I actually want the building to be an architectural element that people can see. But what's interesting is if I'm on the backside of the warehouse and nobody's there, then what's my principal task? Well, it might be washing the wall, or it could be monitoring security depending on the light level. And so if you watch the screen here, let's see if this works well in here. You could, in theory, dim the principal walking task if there's nobody there, right? And then if someone comes up, you can bring it brighter. Now, why is it you guys don't see more of this yet? And I'll have an answer for that. A few years ago, LEDs, and I don't mean the LED luminaire, I mean LEDs cost a lot of money, right? I look down here on the street, and there's the largest LED screen I think I have just about ever seen that's lighting a whole building over here, right? And thank heavens for New York, lots of big LED screens. Believe it or not, they've been making a lot of these things, and they're getting better and better at it, and they're getting more and more cost effective. And so what would have been cost prohibitive a couple of years ago, I think will become an opportunity in the future. So, what is the future? Intelligent lighting, dynamic distributions, the Internet of lighting, and better performance. I love this picture, not because I used to have that, the Apple II that's shown there. My first computer was and I got a couple of geeks in the room I can tell, mine was a 486-66 with a 50 megabyte hard drive. Now you think about that. That was a little large.
Not a Commodore?
Not a Commodore. Well, okay, that's kind of a cheap, that's another story. So I had that computer, and I want to say a couple things about it for especially some of the younger people in the room. So a 50 megabyte hard drive, a little bit of perspective here, that would hold about 3 iPhone photos. That computer cost me $3,000 in 1992. So today, that computer would cost me, in today's dollars, $5,000. Right? Who here's bought a laptop lately? Right? You can get a laptop as low as $400, $450. $1,300 for a really good model, right? So if you buy a laptop for that much, and we use that math, that means in a few years, laptops that cost $100. Who here thinks they're going to buy a $100 laptop? Right? The answer is your telephone, right? We've actually come to the point of entitlement, meaning really they've gotten as cost effective as they're going to get. And that raises an interesting question. That's why I want to talk a little about this real quick, which is, what is the future? This is from the DOE. This is kind of a projection around color performance over time. And this kind of takes roughly a 10-year look back and a 10-year look forward. And so I have a lot of people say, I still get people who say, are LEDs really ready for prime time? Do you think really LEDs are the future? I'm like, yes, they're the future. Right? Is it going to be like 10 times more efficient in a few years? No, it's not going to be 10 times more efficient. Right? And so when you look at this thing, over the course of the last 10 years, we've seen a 3-fold increase in efficacy. Based on the best calculations and the best minds in the space today, we estimate roughly at best a 40% increase in efficacy from where we currently are. So if you're sitting at 100 lumens per watt, you'll be something on 140 lumens per watt stabilized. That's the future. So we kind of getting close to that entitlement. But I love showing this slide because I've been in LED lighting just long enough. Here's a curve of cost. Now this is for, you can't read it, an A19 60-watt replacement lamp. And they went out and surveyed people that were offering for sale. And what you see around that 2007 time, and I want to say this very carefully, are lamps that cost roughly $200. How many 60-watt lamp replacements would you buy for $200? Right? I think most people, I've got one guy's like, 5 of those things, love them. And they're going to last for 50 years, so it works. But what's interesting is, I just bought a 60-watt replacement for $6. Right? Now, what that curve shows you is, while I got one for $6, we're hitting close to entitlement, meaning it's not going to get a lot cheaper than that. Right? So that's kind of the future. So I'm going to leave with 2 little quick notes. 1, use electricity wisely. You don't need to light the things that don't need to be illuminated, and I'll say particularly the sky, right? And with that, and I think because the room's large enough, I can probably take a question or two. And if not, I thank you for your time. Yes?
Good evening. The thing that you didn't address was what does light from LEDs do to trees?
We do need trees. Okay, I'll take this, and I'm going to say this kind of carefully. There are a handful of plants that really cannot be illuminated 24 hours a day. It's kind of funny when I say it like that, but there are plants, and I'll pick on the iceberg lettuce, that can be illuminated. Does anyone know that in Alaska during the summer when it's sunny virtually 24 hours a day, iceberg lettuce grows huge, right? So there are certain types of vegetation that can be exposed to continuous light and continually grow. Corn can only be illuminated about 12 to 16 hours a day. If you pass that, corn dies, and this is getting really into the weeds, so to speak. I looked at algae for reasons I won't go into, and the spectral response curve of algae, but I can't say I know all trees. I am not aware, and I'll say this carefully, I'm not aware of anybody having a problem with maybe die off of trees due to the LED lights that have been placed around them. But if you remind me, I'll give you my card and we can take that one offline. I'd be glad to find out for you. Any other really great questions?
No? Okay, well, let's all give it up for Jeff one more time. So Jeff will sit around for a bit, and if you guys want to grab him offline and ask some questions, he'd be happy to take them. As I mentioned before, AA certificates CEU certificates and AA sign-in sheet is just around the corner. Thank you all so much for coming. We'll see you guys next time. Feel free to stick around for some more food and drinks.